The Toronto Raptors have started 2-1 this year. I've really liked what I've seen, and I think that Raptors fans should be really, really excited about the direction of the team. The Miami Heat, they beat them 98-90 in their third game after a loss, 112-109. And then they lost, actually, they're 2-2, I guess. When did I miss a game here? I missed a game at some point.
Because they played the Heat twice and they got bludgeoned the
That's
game
right.
before. Yeah.
Yeah, why did I think they only played the Heat once? But they lost to the Nets by 4 and they beat the Cavs by 3. It's been a lot of tight games for the Raptors, and it is interesting to me the way they've looked. This is a team that is just kind of struggling a little bit with depth right now, it feels like. This is a team that is getting an absolutely superhuman performance from Pascal Siakam basically every night that he's playing at this point. Obviously, Scotty Barnes is kind of like day to day. It seems like Otto Porter is currently out. They're starting Christian Koloko at center in their last game. It's just kind of a wild ride, it feels like, for the Raptors. But overall, I think that the impressions are positive with the Raptors early this season, especially given that they banked wins against Cleveland and Miami.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. I think that they're still trying to figure some things out, and like you mentioned, I think part of that is with the depth. Like Otto Porter Jr. is going to do so many positive things for this team. Like this is a team that last year, pretty much outside. I mean, like obviously Fred VanVleet's a movement shooter, but considering how much more he was on the ball, he can toggle off the ball. But like Gary Trent Jr. was really their only consistent movement shooter last year outside of Fred VanVleet. And for an offense that already has some systemic issues just in how stagnant they can be, part of that's the way that they want to play, but also that's personnel. Having Otto is going to be huge with that. And somebody who's moving the ball as well, too. Like if you're passing the ball to Gary Trent Jr., you're not getting it back. With Otto Porter, it's going to be different. And I've obviously, too, I mean, like Scotty Barnes is out right now with an ankle injury. So I think it makes sense with what you see yesterday. But also, it was kind of enticing, like seeing Christian Koloko get that start. I think he was the only Raptor to finish with a negative plus minus, if I remember correctly, which I think is indicative of being a rookie, but also like you could see some real positivity there. And I've liked what his minutes have been overall. He was somebody, as soon as they drafted him 33rd overall, I really was into it. He's very much a Raptors guy. Like he has the mobility, he has the ability to do things and be versatile on court, but figuring out his offensive game is going to be an endeavor. And I think he's missed like 6 or 7 dunks already this year, which is going to be a resounding theme. But I mean, he really was able to stifle Bam Adebayo a couple times when it really mattered yesterday. So I think there are just a lot of things that you can look at and be pretty positive about with this team right now.
Yeah, the Koloko pick was interesting, if only because if it was any other team, I'd have been like, this is a nightmare waiting to happen. But with their developmental system, I actually believe in the Raptors to be able to get the most out of his offense and try to work on his hands a little bit. I thought he was the most effective defensive player in the country last year at Arizona. I thought he was absolutely incredible defensively. They really ran a heavy drop scheme with him. And I think that that's what you're going to have to do with Toronto. You're going to have to keep just running a heavy drop. I'm not huge on his switchability, especially as he continues to grow into his body and maybe loses some of that mobility. He has very, very high hips, I think. He's just kind of got these like super long legs and doesn't have crazy strength throughout his legs. And I worry about what this kind of looks like as he continues to develop. But I think that your overall takeaways on him, particularly because I think he's a very interesting addition just in terms of length and ability to defend the basket. This is a team that desperately needed that last year. You know, Chris Boucher, as much as we enjoy the weak side shot blocking, as much as we enjoy the 3-point shooting, some of what he can bring in transition, not a guy that like is all that impactful around the basket defensively unless he's rotating over from the weak side. It's intriguing to watch this team, especially that last game against Miami without Scotty Barnes, because that is one of the games I watched, the game that they beat Miami. And I really, really like where this team is headed, if only because Pascal Siakam, he played his worst game of the season in that game, I thought. He had 23 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists, and just looks like he is one of the 10 best players in the NBA right now. And this is a guy that nobody talked about in this capacity coming into the year. This is a guy that has for years now been drastically underrated, in my opinion. You look at what he's brought to the table, the way he closed last season, the way he's continually added different things to his game over the course of his career. This has not been, a typical projection curve where it goes up and up and up and then kind of stagnates at a certain point. The way that his work ethic is and the way that he continues to play, he just continues to add different things to his game consistently every single year that he comes back. This year, I think he's just been much more aggressive, it seems, as a driver. And he feels a little bit more aggressive as a shooter. Like he's actually just kind of pulling from three really confidently in a way that we haven't seen previously. If he's a 3-point shooter that like they can rely on, when you get Scotty Barnes back, it eases everything for everyone, I think, on this roster.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, I think the biggest thing is just the drives overall. I think he really took a pretty sizable leap with that last year in terms of like, obviously, like the drives have been a thing for him and what's been interesting about him since he got into the NBA. But it's the way that he's been able to expand on it. Like last year, I felt like you could really see the pacing and tempo start to develop for him and where he's really able to slow down, but then also really hit the shift. Like I think that's the biggest difference you see in guys. Like obviously, like when Ja first came in the league, everything's 100 miles an hour, but honestly faster than that. And now, like, I mean, something we'll talk about, like this year, like he's really starting to mix in just like quick stops and starts, and it obliterates people. And I think with Pascal being 6'9", what he's doing, a friend of mine who covers the Raptors, Samson Folk over at Raptors Public, posited this to me that he's the best live dribble creator that's like the best live dribble forward right now. Obviously not like Luka or one of the guards or whatever, but in terms of being able to destroy a defense with your drives, like I think he's there with what he can do in terms of just absolutely blowing up the paint. Like it's got
to be Giannis, right?
Well, okay. I mean, Giannis is his own thing. Giannis is a different animal, but like in terms of like,
I understand your point though.
Yeah. But like he's doing like legit manipulation stuff. Like it's not just I'm just making an open read. Like no, he's actually trying to manipulate defenders and make passes like that. I still wish that they would do more of letting him run inverted pick and roll because they just don't do it enough. But he's so good at mashing out of the high post, out of the mid post, and then driving and reposting and doing just a ton of stuff with his brute strength and physicality that I don't really think there are too many teams equipped to handle. Like in that game against the Cavs that you mentioned, I mean, we just saw him take every single guy that they could throw at him and demolish them. Like Chetty Osman was seeing stars. Any of the guards that had to deal with him was in trouble and sent him to the foul line. Even like, I mean, Evan didn't really see too much of him. Neither did like Jarrett saw him a little bit, but both of them, I believe, fouled him and sent him to the line. Like he's just kind of that idealistic version of a mismatch nightmare while also being more than that. And it's been really impressive along with the defense too. And the biggest thing too that we haven't even mentioned, like I mentioned the fouls, but he's getting to the line 8 times a game. He's gotten to the line 8 times a game or more all 4 games already. And it feels replicable. Like it's not just part of it is him playing, like 35 plus minutes every game. But he's cooking with grease right now. He's a top 10 player in the NBA without question for me.
Yeah, so it's worth noting here, you bring up the idea of drives, right? So I'm looking at NBA.com stats page. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and John Morant are at the top of the league. No surprise there with drives. Pascal Siakam is averaging 15 drives per game this year. The guys at the top of the league, Shai, Ja, De'Aaron Fox, Trae Young, Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson, Kevin Porter Jr., Jordan Clarkson, Cade Cunningham, Anthony Edwards, and then you get to Pascal Siakam. That's like the pick out the guy who looks different thing. Yeah. And then like you go right past him, it's Tyrese Halliburton, Bradley Beal, Luka Doncic, Damian Lillard, James Harden, Drew Holiday, CJ McCollum, Jimmy Butler, DeMar DeRozan, Gordon Hayward, Malcolm Brogdon, Jalen Green. Like you have to get to Franz Wagner at 11.5, who is like 30th in the league in drives, to where you get to someone who is remotely similar in terms of size to Pascal Siakam and in terms of role to Siakam. The drives are the thing. Like he's just been so much more aggressive in being willing to attack the basket in the way that he is. And that's why I think that your point about the foul drawing is replicable at the end of the day. If you're going to be that aggressive consistently, I think you're going to live at the line, especially when you're that big of a mismatch problem and you can get a step on your guy consistently. So yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Like, I think this is absolutely a legit leap for Siakam. The thing that, have you kind of felt like Raptors fans are starting to not turn on Nick Nurse, but like, it felt like it was all positive, like just genuinely like all positive up until maybe late last year into this year. I've seen a lot more negative stuff about Nick Nurse than I ever have before.
That's interesting. So I admittedly I've still been on Twitter a lot, but I think I've been less perusing Twitter, more just posting things on it to get my thoughts out. It's in all honesty, like I don't want to say I get it, but I do think I understand, like, just because I mean, my girlfriend's Canadian, so I know a lot of people who are Raptors fans. I get where some of the frustrations come from because that GM survey came out, what was it, 2 weeks ago? And Nick Nurse got voted as like the second most inventive head coach on offense in the league.
Yeah,
and I was like, that is so far and away not true. Like,
yeah.
I think on one hand, it's just frustrating because a lot of, and not saying us, but I think media in general has kind of put Nurse on a pedestal. Like everything gets back to like, oh, well, he ran a box and won in the playoffs. Oh, he's so inventive. He's this, he's that. And I think in some ways it really is undersold how freaking good this roster is. Like, I think there's been some underselling of, like you mentioned, like Pascal is underrated, but not of his own doing. I think that he just doesn't get highlighted enough. Like so often it's like, well, they just defend so well, and then Nick just schemes the hell out of the offense and they get by. And it's just not the case, man. Like, this is a really good roster.
Well, you know how it's easy to create mismatches like in 6 different spaces at once.
Having a lot of guys who are 6'8" or taller. Like,
having guys that are 6'9" or taller that can handle the ball. Like, to me, Masai is the guy here. This isn't disrespect Nick Nurse. I think he does a really good job of getting the team organized. They always know what they're trying to do offensively. They always know what their goals and rotations are defensively, right? Like nobody would deny that. It's more, like this offense in the half court looks like a stale clogged toilet sometimes. Yeah. And we need to be real about that as well. I think he does a good job of trying to find those mismatches, but I think that it often ends up being kind of like iso ball-y once he gets those mismatches, right? The other thing that I see people complaining about with Nurse is the minutes load that his stars get. Matty Canuck over on Twitter. Let's get his actual handle. Matty Canuck 430 sent to us. Local writers won't do it. Need someone to tear Nick Nurse a new one for playing Fred VanVleet and Siakam into the ground again. Look, I think every team would love to be able to not play their stars a ton of minutes. The problem right now, I actually agree with Nick Nurse in like trying to play them quite a few minutes right now, if only because I think that they have to. This is a team that does not have a crazy amount of depth. Like Delano Banton is playing 9 minutes a night. I think I saw did Malachi Flynn play a couple nights ago?
Yeah, he played last night too.
Yeah, like, Juan Hernan Gomez is playing real minutes, and like shout out Wancho, but are we
not
sure Wancho?
Yeah,
are we sure Wancho should be in a rotation?
Normally the move that you'd want.
Yeah, like just being real with it. Are we sure that Thad Young is a rotation player anymore? Like, it's complicated, and I think that the Raptors really need to go out and probably get some more depth pieces before people start complaining about Nick Nurse playing his starters minutes, because at the end of the day, like, the Eastern Conference is going to be hard this year. Like, it's going to be hard to make a top 6 spot in the Eastern Conference, and to bank wins against Miami and to bank wins against, Cleveland, like they did early in the season, that's important. Like they banked a win against Miami without Scotty Barnes. Like I get playing your guys when you just don't have enough depth to account for it. Like I think that this is almost like more, I don't want to say it's a failing of Masai Ujiri. It's more that I think that this team doesn't have a lot of depth, and that probably does come back to building the roster essentially in a way that is so reliant on the starters is maybe the way to put it.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting conundrum because personally, like I mean, this is going way back, but I don't think that they've done like not that Malachi Flynn has been amazing in the NBA, but I think you could see right when they drafted him, they didn't actually have a pick and roll big on the roster. I was like, what are we doing here? Like Malachi Flynn is one of the best pick and roll players. Well, arguably was the best pick and roll player in the country that year.
Yeah.
And it's like if you're drafting him to just try and fit into the system, I'm not sure that that's the right move.
Yeah,
So
you
like,
can't draft Malachi Flynn and not have him run ball screens.
exactly. And so my hope is that they'll run more stuff with him in Koloko and bench units whenever that is actually like something that they can work into games. Cause I imagine like with what they tend to do, it's a little bit mix and match for whatever game comes up. But even like we had, like, I think Otto Porter Jr., that's going to be huge. He's going to play like 18, 20 minutes a game easily. Having Scotty out, that makes it harder too. Like, but I think just looking around, like, honestly, every team is playing their guys quite a few minutes to start the season. Like Brooklyn,
Yeah.
I think all three of Brooklyn's starter, big three outside of Ben. So if we're considering Royce O'Neal part of the big three, love Royce, but yeah, no. But yeah, like Royce, KD, and Kyrie are all playing 36 plus minutes.
Yeah.
Harden and Maxey are playing 38 minutes. Like every team is playing their guys a lot. I do think because this has been a problem in the past, I am interested to see how it plays out. But I do think that this team is a little bit deeper than it was last year, and there's room for them to finagle some more young player development and just time in there. So I think it's much more of a conversation for me if this is happening a month in still, if we're seeing like regular 39, 40 minute games from guys. But for the most part, I think it's just, we see this to start the year every year because there's statistically, if you win your first game and get off to a better start, it's just better for your team. So TBD on this one.
I agree. I'm not real worried about it right now. I think that they kind of have to play their guys at the end of the day. Like this is it. Like to make the playoffs in the East, this Raptors team has to play Pascal Siakam 36 plus minutes a night. Period. Like it's just what it comes down to. The issue that I have is like, I mean, you look at the end of the bench, like people complained about Boston's end of the bench coming into the year. The end of this Raptors bench, like for most of their games so far, has been like Justin Champagnie, Jeff Doughton, Ron Harper Jr. Champagnie had a couple of nice stretches last year that were okay, but like energy guy that can come in and like maybe like just like fuck shit up for 5 minutes at a time, right? Jeff Doughton's been a G League guy. Ron Harper Jr. is like a two-way rookie. I'll be honest with you, like I get why the Raptors want to invest minutes in Delano Banton. He is really interesting in terms of skill set and in terms of being able to pass at 6'9". I don't know how effective Delano Banton is at this point as a basketball player. So you look at that, like, and then you have Juancho, who we kind of discussed previously. You have Malachi Flynn that like your offense doesn't totally fit. I mean, that's what 6 or 7 guys on your bench that, you probably aren't going to get like a crazy amount of value about, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's tough too, because especially with Delano, like outside of like the transition stuff is really enticing, and he can do some things defensively that are interesting, and he's gotten like a little bit more flexible. But again, like I still think he's a little bit of ways away from being a real impact player, and maybe that changes this year as some development happens. But right now, like especially without having like the consistent shot, like he's just not really. With what this team is right now, he's not ready to be a rotation player. But that's where it makes it interesting, like talking about, okay, how can you kind of gamble with being willing to play somebody 8 to 10 minutes a night and still getting them consistent minutes and roll and run. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah. But I'm in on the Raptors. This is a fun team. This is going to be even more fun when Scotty Barnes gets back.